I'm CM Magina from the Strange and Unusual podcast, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Hello and welcome to episode 39 of Better Podcasting. My name is Stephen John Drew, and with me today is Stargate Pioneer.
Yes, everybody calls me SP. You can call me SP. We just love to podcast and we love to talk about it. We do it for a hobby and we love to get that information out to you, to answer your questions, to give you the information that you need to make your podcast as good as it can be.
Absolutely. He loves it when you call him SP. That's a song that isn't really a song, but I just thought that I would try to make it sound like a song because it's Friday that we record this at geeks.live. That's right. We do indeed stream this out live, which you can chat with us. SP's, I'll be honest, he's the really, really good one at responding because I'm too busy switching cameras and doing other crazy things. But yes, that is something that you can chat with us while we do record this on Fridays at geeks.live.
I do believe that Night Ranger is in the middle of releasing the song I Love to Be Called SP.
That's true. I heard about that. No, I didn't. Okay, so today we actually have a very, very exciting opportunity for you. That's right. We are going to announce a brand new contest. Are you excited to announce this, SP?
I'm so excited to announce this. This is absolutely great. We've been waiting for this one for a while. We do have other contests in the future planned, but I know a lot of you were asking us, hey, what's the next contest? We've got it for you. So we're giving away this brand new, absolutely in the box, upside down apparently at the moment, Audio-Technica AT2005 dynamic cardioid microphone, USB and XLR compatible. And all you have to do to enter is tweet us, give us a Facebook post, or email us and say what the name of your podcast is and how you heard about us. That's it. That's all you have to tell us. And if you want to tell us a little bit about how you're going to use it, that would be great too. But really all you have to do is tell us the name of your podcast, how you heard about us, and you get free promotion because we're going to talk about it on the podcast. Yay!
Wait. So you're saying not only do I get to enter, well, maybe not me because I'm excluded, but do I, as speaking for the audience, get to enter for an amazing Audio-Technica AT2005 USB microphone, but I also get to promote my podcast. Is that right?
That's right. And there's no dash on the box.
Flip it on the side.
There's no dash on the box.
Well, then this time I'm wrong. But hey, the USB is definitely on the box. So AT2005 USB, no, absolutely. Please, doesn't matter. As long as you're not SP and myself, enter, tell us exactly what we asked for, and you can email contest@betterpodcasting.com. That's a great way to do it. And if you want to do a big long post, a big long message for us, cool. That's always fun. But ultimately, tell us a little bit about yourself, the name of your podcast, and we will talk about it on here. And make sure you do specify you're entering for the contest so we do know. And we are going to run this until the end of September 2016. And again, just like our previous contests, I want to make sure people know this is something that we have chosen ourselves. It is not sponsored by Audio-Technica. I wish it was, but it's not. And we absolutely just love this microphone. It's a microphone that we generally use on the road. It's part of our Rode bag, as you know, and it is a very, very good microphone. Plus, it's the big, quote unquote, big brother of the ATR 2100. They're basically the same microphone, but personally, I like the visual just a little bit better on the AT 2005.
I do. I like the squared off. We talked about this before. The squared off cage. I like the flush turn on and off switch, and I like the black versus the gray. But yeah, it doesn't matter. If you're doing an audio podcast, nobody's going to see you. It's just a matter how you sound, and they both sound the same. So in this particular case, we're giving it away in AT 2005. We gave away an ATR 2100 before. We got other stuff to give away, and it's all been purchased by us. Nobody's been sponsoring it. It's a giveaway from Better Podcasting. So enjoy it. Let us know how you found out about us and the name of your podcast.
For sure. Before we do get to our main topic here, I want to just share a somewhat weirdly related story to the AT 2005. As I mentioned, AT 2005 is part of the travel bag that SP and I have. And I recently traveled, and I decided to do a little bit of a test. And I left my Skyposaurus going. I left a couple of specific components on. I didn't want to leave them all running, but I left a couple of components on. And I did a little bit experimenting of trying to control my crazy Skyposaurus contraption from remote in a hotel room. And it actually didn't work too bad. Now, there's a couple of resource issues, but it was just fun to actually try it. We didn't do a podcast, but SP and I did get together and do a bit of a test. And definitely might be something for consideration in the future if I find myself on the road during a Better Podcasting recording, because, I don't know, it kind of was really neat in a weird, geeky way.
Mm-hmm. You know what I did that was really neat in a weird, geeky way?
What'd you do?
I went to Indianapolis because I met up with our friends Neil and Michelle, and we did an in-person Starling Tribune podcast about the Rebirth DC comic universe. So if you want to see that, we actually are podcasting in the hotel room. We used a bunch of different microphones that are meant to take on the road in the studio or whatever, and you can catch that at Starling Tribune number 113. It's also on the GonnaGeek.com YouTube channel. So if you want to see how it turned out, that is where it is. So we both did some mobile podcasting this week.
That's awesome. And just the power of connections in the podcasting world, which maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and get into our main topic. Here we go. Alrighty, so for our main topic today, we are talking about something that is, can sometimes be a bit of a taboo subject. We are talking about podcast statistics. Why do I say that it might be a taboo subject? Because some people obsess a little bit, and we're going to touch on that. We're going to give you a bit of information about podcast statistics. We've talked about possibly doing this arc before, and we wanted to dedicate an episode definitely to it. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to break down a little bit of research that we conducted. This is some unique, exclusive research, Better Podcasting research, isn't it?
It is, and by unique, specific, he means that, like, mostly Steven, I answered questions from here and there once in a while, but Steven actually went out and he hosted the main GonnaGeek.com show on several different media hosts, basically ran them all through the PowerPress plugin on the Gonna Geek network. So we were able to capture the differences in statistics, and we were able to get some comparisons and the almighty, are the stats really accurate with this certain media host or not? So we'll get to that in a second, but first we got to lay some groundwork down.
Absolutely. So let's get to the basics here. Podcast statistics. What do you want to do if you are going to use podcast statistics? Well, it is a very important thing to sometimes gauge your growth in your audience. I said it before, I'm a firm believer that anybody who podcasts has, even on some small level, a desire to grow. I really just don't believe people who say that they don't want to grow if they're podcasting. I really feel like on some level, people do want to grow, even if it's just a small amount. So this is a great way to track your audience, because while you can gauge with audience interaction. At the end of the day, there's a large amount of podcast listeners that won't interact. I know for me, I have listened to a ton of podcasts over the years that I just never bothered to send an email. I was bad. I didn't send an email. I didn't say a great job. I didn't say, hey, I loved when you did this. I just listened, enjoyed the episode, and continued on. So there's a lot of people who will do that.
Yes, and those people could be, if you want to advertise eventually on your podcast, those people could be completely engaged in your content and would support you in any way too. So don't just throw those people away. You have to assume that they're there, and you have to talk to your entire audience, and you have to get a listener. If you want to grow, you're growing even those people. You're growing the people that are talking to you all the time live in the chat room. You're talking about the people that tweet you later or email you later or send in voicemails or whatever. And you're talking to the people that are just in their cars or in their subway or whatever, just listening to you, or at work or whatever, and just passing the time, but enjoying your content. So you want to grow all of those.
Yeah.
But the only way you're going to know what your total number is by looking at your statistics.
Absolutely. There's no real other way to do it. So if you do want to pay attention to statistics, what you want to sort of pay attention a little bit, there's a variety of different forms that you can get them in. Some are detailed, some are basic. Some of them you have to pay. Sometimes you get them for free with your hosting company. You do get a variety, but here are some things that we think you should really pay attention to, which is number one, the obvious, the overall downloads. Are they going up or are they going down? Let's not even break it down to numbers yet. Let's look. What is my trend? If I am seeing that I'm going down, that means I'm doing something wrong and I'm not maintaining that listenership. Maybe it's time for a format change. Maybe it's time to realize that you've accidentally done a format change and go back to what your listeners like before. Pay a little bit of attention to the trend, up or down. And I say trend, look at it in the big picture. Just because you get a little spike doesn't mean that instantly you're a big thing and you're set for life. No, people at different episodes get more popular than others. So pay attention to the overall direction.
I think that this is the number one thing to be concerned about with statistics. No matter what your download numbers are, no matter what your day one download numbers are, no matter what your 30-day download numbers are, doesn't matter. Just make sure when you're trending it, compare it to your other podcasts. Don't compare yourself to other podcasts. Just make sure that you're comparing it to your own and that you're either going up or you're going down so that you can monitor your progress in terms of audience growth, because we said we're assuming that you want to grow. So even if it's just 1 or 2 new listeners a month, that is the number one thing to do. Look at that trend, but it's not the only statistics to pay attention to.
No. Now, we've talked before about really paying attention to the development of your podcast. Keep the listener having a reason to come back. Try new things. Find out what they like. And this is a great way to do it. I talked about sometimes you'll get those spikes in episodes. Why? Why did that happen? Which are your highest episodes? Is there a common thread? Maybe all of a sudden you're finding that when you reach out to a certain style of podcasting, maybe interview, you get a lot more traffic. Okay, maybe you want to do a little bit more of that. On the flip side, maybe you find that we had to do a shorter episode and you found you got more people that week. Maybe you're going too long. There's a variety of things that you can extrapolate by looking at which are my highest episodes.
Yes. If you want to know what your content, what style of content, what specific subject on the content is really driving home to your audience, you'll see those spikes. Now, it could be like a web scraper or a bot or something like that. So you have to pay attention if you're on a service like Libsyn or whatever for where the downloads are coming from, because if they're coming all from one place, it's probably some sort of a hack of some sort or another. But if it's truly legitimate, if it's across the spectrum in terms of location where your downloads are coming from, then you have hit a little mini gold mine, and you want to start doing that more and more and more. It might be a one-shot, like with WTF, when you had President Obama come on. It was over 2 million downloads in like just a couple of days or something like that. That was a big spike. did it bring new listeners to Mark Maron? Probably a few, but he's not going to keep on getting $2 million downloads per podcast. So yeah, it will give you a good indicator of what content to focus in on, or style, or special whatever that you've done, but you'll have to make sure it's sustainable after that too.
Absolutely. And you touched on it there. The sources are a great place to pay attention to. And you can find sources of a couple different ways, right? You can find geographical, and you can find through the interweb sources, right, SP?
Yeah, there's sources of where it came from in terms of like the web page that it's coming from, or like if you're clamoring, it will actually tell you if somebody clicked on your podcast from the clamor itself, if it's coming from your Twitter post, if it's coming from Facebook post. This is all on Libsyn. This is what I'm used to on Libsyn. But if you have the ability to go in and look at the source for where the download came from, referred from, then that is where you want to key in on.
Mm-hmm.
And you could for instance, if you're doing a podcast on Android and your iOS downloads are like nil, you don't want to pay attention to iTunes at all, and you want to concentrate on Google Play Music, on Stitcher, on content like that. So you might not be really caring about your iTunes listing as much as you would other places, and vice versa. I know like Rob Walsh does a Today in iOS podcast, and it's all about the iPhone, the iPad, that sort of thing. And I guarantee you he doesn't care too much about the Android places.
Yeah. And the other side of that is I said geographical. Finding out where your audience is actually listening, Canada, US, elsewhere, can be very, very important for two sort of reasons. Number one, know your audience. If all of a sudden I see that the Better Podcasting podcast is way more popular in Canada than the States, well, you can bet I'm going to throw a cup of Tim Hortons behind me to promote. No, I'm just kidding. But I would know a little bit more, that I could be topical, make a few more jokes towards maybe some Canadian style jokes, right? Because I would know that was the case. That's not going to happen on Better Podcasting, though.
I live closer to a Tim Hortons than Steven does.
It's probably true.
It is.
The other thing is, and sometimes this is a bit of judgment, but if you are seeing that all of a sudden you're getting a big spike in traffic from a country that isn't that familiar, that isn't sort of your usual expectation that you would have for listening to, if you do an English-based podcast, that might be a good sign of spam. I've actually found that before, because all of a sudden I've seen a country pop up on my radar that wasn't there before, and I do a bit of digging, and sure enough, yeah, there's an indication that I've got a bunch of spam bots downloading the episode. So you can do a bit of extrapolation based off of that as well.
Yeah, and if you're part of a network, or you've gotten flagged on a different network for great content, like somebody's actually quoting you from another podcast or whatever in another network, you want to know that sort of thing, so you can go and interact with their audience if they're liking what you're doing, and just all sorts of great stuff. You know, pay attention to your statistics, but again, don't obsess about them. Don't go to them every day, every hour, every 15 minutes at work. Don't do it.
No.
Once a day is even too much. When you first start, you might want to do that, but eventually you're just not going to have time. The novelty will wear off, but you still want to pay attention to them, because the big trendings over the course of a month, a year, years will tell you exactly how you're doing. And I'll tell you, with the podcasts that I do, if things aren't going up, we really look at, what exactly are we doing? Is the content really that boring or whatever? We'll get some opinions from some people that we trust, and then we'll try to make changes from that.
Absolutely. And one thing that also can really help you track sort of your audience gauge and how you're interacting. We've talked about promotion and distribution before. Well, one way that you can promote your podcast is if you know what keywords you want to put in your podcast. And a lot of these statistic services will tell you how people are finding your podcast when they search. Like they go to Google, or they go to Bing, or they travel back in a time machine and go to Alta Vista. You can absolutely discover how people are searching for you. And when you do that, maybe you want to tag similarly to how that's happening, or you're finding that, oh crap, this joke that I made in my show notes is actually picking up traffic. Well, you know that that's probably not going to hook. If you're putting accidentally getting people finding you from a one-time joke about Tim Hortons, and you're not a podcast that regularly talks about Tim Hortons, I swear, I'm not being paid by them, by the way. You absolutely want to remove that, because it's just going to bring the wrong type of traffic your direction.
And then you get to find out some kind of neat stuff too. You know, when it looks at little lips and stats, look at technology or whatever. I had a friend once who had a podcast, and they were able to determine that somebody was trying to play their podcast through the Commodore 64 through their statistics. So you could get some neat stuff through that too. I had no idea if it actually worked or not, but somebody actually tried to crawl into their podcast through the Commodore 64.
That's awesome. All right. So those are kind of the key categories that we think you should really pay attention to. And once you become a stats guru, you'll find there's all sorts of other nooks and crannies you can get into. But let's highlight again, when we're going to talk about sort of general advice with looking at your statistics. I can't say this enough this episode. Really, really just be sensible. And as SP said, you might get obsessed with it at first. Pull back those reins, because you actually can almost cloud your vision a little bit if you're checking them too much, where you aren't really seeing the growth that you're making. You're going each day and you're like, darn it, I was only up 1 download today. And meanwhile, you're completely oblivious to the fact that over the last 3 months, you've grown your podcast threefold. So absolutely pay attention to the bigger picture and don't obsess. Use the data right.
I'll give you an example of a surprise. The Starling Tribune. You know, I was talking to my co-host Chris and Neil about this just last week, and I was like, oh man, I thought our downloads were down. I was like really down on the podcast, like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here this summer when Arrow's not on? And, you know, Arrow kind of flubbed it in season 4, and are people leaving the podcast? Because there's nothing you can do about that, by the way. But I was like, oh man. But then I looked at the statistics. They are up like 900% from the summer last year. I'm like, oh man, I mean, that's awesome. We're doing great. Woohoo.
We're
awesome. Excited to podcast now. So stuff like that will happen as well.
That's great. The other thing that you can really, really look and pay attention to by doing some extrapolation is really see the longevity of your episodes. And that's something that I think you should try to pay attention to. You know, don't obsess, but have a glance every now and then of which episodes are still getting a decent amount of traffic from the back catalog, and where is that, like, what is the average length sort of thing? Because you can really tell. Every podcast will start to get a quote unquote tail, where the tail is the back catalog being downloaded, and you can really kind of see the waves. If my podcast on average falls flat after 4 weeks, well, then you know that people are really trying to just more so keep up with your podcast rather than really dive into the back catalog. And the back catalog probably isn't really appealing to a lot of people, which is okay. So just really look at the longevity of your episodes.
2 things. First of all, you have to determine if your content is evergreen. And by that, you need to go into the northern woods and go out there and see if your podcast is being played by some trees out there, some evergreen trees.
That's
right?
Exactly what the term evergreen means.
Right. No, it means, is the content relevant months, years later? That's what it means. Or is it time specific, where people really need to listen to the content within the first couple of days, couple of weeks, maybe couple of months, and then it's just not relevant anymore, so nobody goes into it. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, if you do pay attention to your stats every once in a while, you will find days where people are downloading your entire back catalog. Now, it's happened on Better Podcasting. It's happened on all my podcasts. I can tell when somebody goes in and actually downloads the entire run of the podcast. And there are people that do that, and it happens more often than you think. And that just means that your content is great. You found a new listener, you found a new subscriber, and that somebody is enjoying your content. And those are the days that I love, because those are the days where you find out, one, that your content is a little bit evergreen, even if it's specific, like a TV podcast or whatever. Somebody's actually going back and watching the TV, or they want to review the episodes through your eyes, and they want to get prepared for the next episode, next season or whatever. And 2, they're just enjoying your content. And it's like, win should wing. And that is awesome. So those are the days where stats really come and they say congratulations. And then oftentimes it's followed by like a tweet or an email or something like a day or two later. I'm loving your podcast. We're listening to them all. And it's great. It happened to us on, again, on Starling Tribune last week. Somebody was like, I'm loving your content on Legends of Tomorrow. It's awesome. I'm like, yeah, I knew when you downloaded those episodes.
There's actually a third possibility too, and it's that you have that maybe you're friends with SP and you haven't heard from Stats for a while, so you just download his whole back catalog just to get him to talk about. No, I'm just kidding. SP's always talking about Stats. There's not a day that goes by that he's not talking about Stats. So we all know that was a lie.
That's not true, but okay.
Okay, so you're going to look at the longevity. Well, let's look at the flip side of things. Let's look at the short-term picture, the immediate release. And this is what I have dubbed SP's patented stats watching service.
Trademarked and registered, too. Patented, trademark, registered. Absolutely. No, not really. And as Daniel J. Lewis would say, my SP's patented statistics special sauce. No, not really. But here's what it is, guys. You have statistics that happen, and largely most of your downloads for any podcast that you do will come within the first 48 hours. Now, I try to time my release to when the statistics cut off every day. Daily statistics for any podcast host or any statistics will cut off at a particular time. For Libsyn, it's Greenwich Mean Time, or I forget if it's not London time, but it's like somewhere in England, Greenwich, and it's Universal Mean Time, and their clocks just run over. So in my case, at 8 p.m. Eastern time zone during daylight savings time, 7 p.m. standard time zone, because that's just what we set Libsyn to for our podcast. That is when I try to drop my episodes so that we can see the time trail of an entire day there. Mm-hmm. So what we try to do is we try to track that for each podcast episode that goes out for day 1 and day 2. Most of the episodes or most of the downloads come in day 1. Those I consider to be your quote unquote subscribers. Now it's going to be more than your subscribers in any given thing because people are seeing your content, they're expecting your content, and they'll play your stuff even if they aren't subscribed to you. But for the most part, it gives you a good example of what your subscribers are. Like, for instance, a TV podcast in the off season, if it's during the regular fall to spring season, during the summer, you're going to have less people listening, but you're going to see what your subscriber base is because for the first few weeks anyway, they're going to continually ping that download. Like if it's iTunes or one of the other podcatchers that automatically updates when a new episode comes down, you're going to see how many subscribers you really have. And they go up and down, and you'll see how many people stick with it, whatever. And iTunes has this great thing. And if you haven't refreshed or listened to an episode in a particular podcast for 5 episodes, it cuts you off. It says, nah, we're not going to update you anymore. So you might end up losing subscribers that way as well. It's totally different than YouTube. If you're familiar with the YouTube way of subscribing, totally different because it actually downloads it, given your podcatcher, if it's iTunes, if it's Overcast, whatever, it actually downloads your podcast to that podcatcher. So the idea is that you will get an idea of the total amount of downloads. So, but you have to manually track that because I don't know of any place that only gives you the first 2 days worth of downloads in their statistics. So you just take that out. I mean, you get it, but you have to take it out and put it in your own spreadsheet. And there you go. There's an example of what you could consider a subscriber basis. So it's as close as you're going to get unless all these places actually release subscriber information.
Right. And I think that this tends to work really well for sort of that. SP talked about it. He sets things to release based off of when his podcast service cuts off so that he can really see the day trail. Well, the thing is, everybody is in a different time zone. So if, say, for example, I post my podcast today at midnight stat service time, I'll call it that. That's a new term, midnight stat service time. And I, as the listener, or the listener goes and they end up being away, and then they get back to an area where they're able to download like on Wi-Fi, and maybe it is just past midnight stat service time the next day. If I'm only tracking the first day, I'm missing that person. So if you do 2 days, that's a 48-hour window where more often than not, the majority of your subscribers who do have a program or an app that is automatically downloading, they are going to hit a point in their travels where they're going to be able to have that app or that program download usually within the first 48 hours of your downloading. And this is something that actually I wasn't familiar with this idea until SP started to do it, and I've been doing it since. And I agree, after the first 2 days of tracking, statistics in my experience have dropped quite a bit, and you still get stuff the rest of the week, but I'll talk a little bit more about it later. I was heavily tracking, and still am, the GonnaGeek.com shows through the entire week, and yeah, after the first 2 days, boom, there it drops. And so it is a really, really good way to get an idea of your subscriber base.
Right. And once again, don't consider this to be absolutes.
No.
It's really the trend data that you're looking at. And hey, if you launch an episode, if you publish an episode like over the weekend, people aren't going to get it. Most people listen to podcasts on their commute at work or something like that. I mean, trend data has shown that. Rob Walsh over at Libsyn on the feed has said that the most important day for podcast listening is Monday, because that's when people are downloading it for the rest of the week at work, and so on and so forth. So during the week is the most important time. If you launch it on the weekend, you're going to get less numbers. And unless you're consistent, I mean, if you every week, if you launch your podcast on a Friday night or Saturday night, you're going to get continually sound numbers. But my point is, it's the trend data that you're looking for. It's not one specific episode. It's overall, because any episode could be a dud for any given time. Like if you happen to launch it over a holiday in a different country and you have no idea, and most of your listeners are in the other country and you have no idea, they're not going to see it for another day or two. And they'll trickle in and listen to it when they can, but they got other things to do. So, I mean, it's just overall that you're looking at.
Yeah. And the other thing I think is great that you can sort of extrapolate by doing that 2-day method is you can actually tell whether or not maybe your listener base is actually listening a little bit different in different seasons. Like maybe in the summer, maybe your audience isn't downloading as fast, and you take a look back and you're like, after 1 week, I've got the same amount of downloads that I did previous weeks, but my first 2 days are down. Well, now you can tell that people in the summer aren't as engaged during that usual time, or it trickles a little bit different. So you could do a lot of guessing and projecting based off of just tracking those first 2 days.
And none of the stats that I know about, other than maybe Spreaker and you have to pay for them, is they don't give you actual demographic information. So you don't know how old your audience is. You don't know the male to female split or anything like that. You might have the majority of your listeners in school. So when school is out, they don't care. They're out and they're doing fun stuff. They're making money if they're college age or even high school age, I guess, or they're just enjoying the summer, you know? And so in different breaks, they will have issues where they're not going to be listening to podcasts. They're going to be just relaxing or blowing off steam or doing whatever they're doing, whether it's spring break or the holidays or whatever. So if you have a listener base that is school age, whether that's kindergarten or college, you're going to have, or even teachers. I mean, there's plenty of podcasts out there for teachers too.
Oh yeah, there are.
You're going to get less listenership during the break time than you will actually during the time when school is in session.
Absolutely. So that's kind of our general advice that we've got for you for statistics, and sort of some recommendations we have for how you might want to tackle said statistics. And again, said it like 7 times, let's say it an 8th. Be sensible. Don't obsess too much. So let's get into the unique Stephen John Drew research, the exclusive Better Podcasting research. I will preface this first off by saying that this is something that I did on my own based off of the GonnaGeek.com podcast /show, whichever you want to call it. And this is my experience. You as a podcaster who maybe has a whole different set of listeners and types of listeners and people finding you different ways, maybe more traffic, maybe less traffic, might have different results. So this is just based off of my individual data, and results may vary.
Absolutely. Very limited data set too.
Absolutely. So what I did, SP alluded to it, is I went and I had to make some changes on the GonnaGeek.com back back end, and so I had to change some statistic things around. I do regularly use Blueberry, and I thought what would be a great opportunity, as you might know, is I'm usually a self-hoster, but I thought I'm going to sign up for a month of Libsyn. I'm going to sign up for a month of Podbean. Those are the two we regularly talk about. And I'm going to compare the three statistics, Blueberry to Libsyn and then Blueberry to Podbean, and sort of see what sort of variation or deviance that I get between them. And it was a lot of research, unfortunately. With Libsyn, I had to actually go 2 months because the first 2 episodes I had to toss out the data because that was back when we had that web scraper thing that we talked about. So definitely had to go with 2 there. But what I did was I compiled a bit of numbers, and I have gone and I'm going to give you essentially an average where I did the day 1 and 2 method. And then I looked at my weekly downloads that I mentioned, and I'm going to compare the host to Blueberry. And why I'm doing that is because Blueberry is the content or the constant between the service comparison. So I compare Blueberry to Podbean and Blueberry to Libsyn. So having a look here at the 2-day count for my Libsyn test, I found that after 4 episodes, this was episodes 133 of the GonnaGeek.com podcast through episodes 136, I found that there was an average of 20.76% less traffic reported on Libsyn than on the Blueberry side of things. Now, just to give you a bit of information, this was going day to day. So I went into the day to day area of both sites, and I tracked in my spreadsheet like SP does, day 1 download, day 2 download, day 3 download, day 4 download, all the way to the end of the week. And this is the numbers that I got. So that's how I did it. I went to the areas that I could look day by day in a graph sort of form or a table form, depending on the service. For Podbean, after episodes 144 through 147, I found that there was an average of 0.70 more traffic reported on Podbean than on Blueberry. So that was on the day 1 and 2 count. Based off of the week count, so after you compile the entire week's worth, I found that on Libsyn versus Blueberry, there was an average of 20.72% less traffic on Libsyn than reported on Blueberry. Again, the same method using the manual sheet in the day-by-day tracker. And then on Podbean, I found that there was an average of 7.90% more traffic reported on Podbean than on the Blueberry counterpart. So what is with this? That's quite the variance, isn't it, SP?
It is, and it's very interesting. I mean, like statistically, you'd expect maybe 3%, maybe 5% margin of error, but we're beyond that. So I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Well, the answer is actually very obvious. And what it is it's in that day-by-day tracker. When I go into Blueberry, there's 2 big numbers. There is a number that says the total downloads and a number that says the total uniques. When I look at the day-by-day graph on Blueberry, I find that it appears to be based off of the total downloads, not the unique downloads. And I can only extrapolate that Libsyn appears to be closer in line with the unique downloads versus Podbean and Blueberry, which on the day-by-day seem to indicate the total on the day-by-day graph. Now, like I said, on all of these services, you can go in and you can find in different areas, different pockets, different reports, the total uniques, but the what I was really looking at was the SP patented method, because I think that it's a good method. If I was to trademarked
and registered
.com.uk.co.r, there is absolutely a difference between, it seems, the Libsyn reporting versus the Podbean and the Blueberry, because the Podbean and the Blueberry were relatively close when you look at it in comparison to the difference between Blueberry and Libsyn. So I believe that that's the difference. That's what I seem to see from my research and my guess and extrapolation, that's where the variance is. The only thing that really kind of does stump me on this was that Podbean reported more than Blueberry. Now, there is a possibility. What happens is my RSS feed on the GonnaGeek.com podcast is run by PowerPress. PowerPress then points to Blueberry, which then pointed to the media host file. Well, both Libsyn and Podbean have a way that you can view that content directly from the site. I tried to do this in short periods to really reduce the accidental SEO exposure that would be found by that. I set up the sites, closed them down within 4 weeks, but maybe more people, maybe somehow people were discovering me via Podbean and listening directly and bypassing my RSS. That's one theory that I have. It could just be that I know that a lot of these stat services do a little bit of filtering. A lot of them are really proud of it, trying to get rid of some of the junk. A lot of the if you listen to any of the leaders of these podcast services like Blueberry and Libsyn, a lot of them do talk about some of the filtering they're able to do to try to keep statistics accurate. And maybe that's the difference. Maybe Blueberry does a better job than Podbean. I don't know. It's your guess is as good as mine is what I'm saying. But really, when we look at the numbers there seems to be quite a variance on the day-by-day count when you look at the week versus the when you look at the week and the day 1 and 2, and you compare Libsyn to Blueberry and you compare Podbean to Blueberry. There was one other thing that I wanted to quickly compare that was interesting for me, which was that I took the total Libsyn, which I believe is uniques, as I said, based off of my data. I believe it's more than likely uniques that they are going off of. And I compared it to the Blueberry uniques. And what it was I took those 4 episodes, 133 through 136, and I went and I compared those two numbers. And at the end of, I basically went in on a certain date and I said, okay, as of this date, how many downloads does episode 133 have listed on Blueberry? And how many does it have listed on Libsyn? And when I averaged it out, I found that there was a 13% difference when I compared the quote unquote total Libsyn numbers compared to the Blueberry unique numbers. There was a 13% less traffic shown on Libsyn than on the Blueberry. So it's tough for me to say because like I said, my best guess was that Libsyn was showing the uniques. And when I compared it to the Blueberry uniques, there was still more shown on Blueberry. So there is variance. Again, there's a variety of reasons there could be the variance, but it was something that I wanted to find so that I could do the research and report back to you. It is something we always say, don't obsess about statistics. And this is one of the reasons why, because there is variance between the providers.
Yeah, even on the Gonna Geek Network, we have lots of podcasts that host with different media hosts. Either they're self-host or they go through Podbean. I even think we have somebody using Podomatic or whatever. Our recommended is to use Libsyn or Podbean or Blueberry. That would be our recommended. But even within our own network, it would be difficult for us to do a one-to-one comparison with another podcast because of the different media host statistics that are out there. So again, this is why I say don't compare your numbers with anybody else. Just compare them with yourself. And that is the trend with your own podcast means the best there. And that's very interesting that even the uniques are different between Libsyn and Blueberry. I would think that they would be a lot closer, but if they're running 13% difference, that's quite a bit. Once again, it is just for one show over the course of 4 podcasts.
And you're going to be like, Steven, there was a big gap there. Why was there a big gap in there? Well, because I went back to self-hosting for a bit just to have a bit of a cool down period. But I want to reiterate something that I did definitely notice within that, which I've known for a long time. I've been a self-hoster for a long time. When you look at the raw access file hosting, the web host statistics, there is not a very good way to extrapolate that data. And for example, it's really hard to find out how many uniques did I have on a certain episode, or how many downloads did I get on one particular day. And I just wanted to go in and kind of do a little bit of a comparison back. And absolutely the numbers that were on the total downloads under my AW stats on the host did not come anywhere near any of the numbers on Blueberry because there's a bunch of junk that comes in there. And I told you that a lot of the stats guys services do fill these or do try to filter these things out a bit, and your host isn't doing that. So you can get some data in there, but I definitely recommend if you are doing a self-host, use a third-party statistics company that does a little bit of this manipulation. It'll make your life a little bit easier. It'll be easier to track your more quote-unquote real audience and also see your trends. So wanted to give you that research, and interesting for me. I would love to know if you've ever had a similar experience. Maybe you've gone from one host to another and all of a sudden you've seen a mass change in your stats. Let us know. Let us know your experience, because this is, as SP said, just my research off of 4 episodes on each service. And you can contact us through a variety of ways, including facebook.com/betterpodcasting, twitter.com/betterpod, and podcast@betterpodcasting.com. And the final piece of note that I have here is if you are curious about how these services operate, hit up Twitter, hit up Facebook. A lot of the people who are behind these services are pretty open with their objective to try to get the most accurate, what they feel to be the most accurate stats service. Reach out, ask. They might not answer, but they might. It's worth a try.
I would think that Libsyn and Blueberry would be very responsive. Since Podbean is actually headquartered in a different country, you might find it a little bit difficult to get information from them. But yeah, I'd hit any of these guys up and just ask if you're curious, especially if you're looking into advertising, because the download statistics depend on what your CPM is and stuff like that. And don't think that you can really charge more or less because you're going with a different host provider, because they're all very familiar with some variances in the numbers, the advertisers themselves, like Midroll and Podtrack.
Yeah. And before we do go on to the download, because we got to do that, I have one last little thing that I want to throw in here that came with this project, which is if you do find yourself trying to close down an account, in my experience, this is my opinion, it was actually a lot easier on Libsyn than it was on Podbean. Podbean, I had to do a bit of a ticket, do a bit of a cleanup. With Libsyn, they did take care of it. So if you are on one of those two services, I just wanted to give you the fair warning. Maybe you're closing down your show. Hopefully not. But if you are, that's how I had to do it on Podbean. It was a little bit easier on Libsyn. So give you the research. Again, we always try to give you the tools. You go ahead and use them. And that was just a piece of information to report back.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for doing it. I had a ton of fun actually looking into the numbers, and we'll be keeping track of any information that comes out in the pod sphere about this, because everybody's curious about this.
Absolutely. And again, my research only. Here we go.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
Alrighty, for the download this week, we are going to talk about... Wait a minute, SP. I thought we were the only podcast about podcasting.
I thought so too, but apparently in the pod sphere, there is quite a few podcasts about podcasting. And in particular, there's one that just caught my eye in this past week. It's called The School of Podcasting. It used to be called The Morning Announcements at the School of Podcasting. It is officially changed to the School of Podcasting. It's been done by Dave Jackson. He's a solo podcaster, but he does a lot of interviews. And in this particular case, he did an interview with a fellow hobby podcaster by the name of Troy Heinrichs. And Troy, or Heinrichs, excuse me there, Troy. Troy actually does TV-based podcasts, a lot of the same ilk as we do with several of our podcasts here on Gonna Geek Network. So he came on board and told a phenomenal story about how his hobby podcasting had evolved with specific TV shows. More importantly, he dropped a little bit of knowledge. One was that one of the producers or the writers of one of the shows came on one of his podcasts and said, "Hey, look, I have 15 million people that are watching my podcast and or watching my show." And I believe it's The Blacklist that he was talking about. And if I tank an episode, if I write crap, I have just wasted 15 million hours of human life. And the lesson that I took from that was that, hey, look, it's the same way with your podcast. If you throw crap out there, however many people that are listening to you, you have just wasted that much time of human life. So keep that in mind as you are creating your content, that it's actually important to somebody and you are trying to give them the best experience ever.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, by the way, because SP listened to this episode and he sent it to me. He's like, yeah, you got to listen to it. We should talk about it. And I listened, and it is one of the things that stood out in this interview. And it's a great realization that, you know, it's on a much smaller scale than 15 million viewers, unless you have 15 million viewers. And then why are you listening to this? But seriously, it is a great way to think about that. Yes, if I put out not so good content, that is wasting a bunch of people's time.
It is. And he went on to say that in the particular episode that he interviewed the showrunner, and I've done a similar thing on Voices of Defiance, where I actually got the showrunner to come on board the podcast, and we did a podcast with the showrunner of Defiance, Kevin Murphy. Well, he did a similar thing with, I believe it's the Blacklist. My mind is actually skipping on me right now, but I think it's Blacklist. And they actually dropped the fact, I think it was in January, that they were greenlit for the next season, the next year. And nobody else, it was an exclusive. Nobody else had caught it. So he ended up getting a tremendous amount of downloads. I believe he said like 15,000 downloads on that one episode, which was all great. Now, the thing that's important there, and we talked about it before in the statistics segment, is that spikes do not necessarily mean consistent growth. Like he didn't keep all those 15,000 listeners, and he admitted it. And he said, no, but I caught a few of them. We did go up, but it wasn't a big jump up all the way up to the 15,000.
Absolutely. There was another very, very good point that was in this interview, and it was talking about networking and ways that you can network, and how he got in touch with a lot of really good industry contacts by one simple message to somebody on Twitter. It was a shared interest on their Twitter profile, started to talk on that subject. Next thing you know, it's led to all sorts of open doors. Really, really neat story, and a really great indication of how you can network. And as you know, or may know, I used to run a comic book website, and we did the same sort of thing. We got a lot of connections just by tweeting an individual creator. Next thing you know, they're interested. Their creator colleagues are now checking us out. So it really does work, and it doesn't have to be Twitter. Maybe you're somewhere, a moment of chance, you find yourself in the same room as somebody. Maybe you talk to that person talks to somebody else. So it's really a great testament to the power of networking.
It is. One last thing that I caught from the episode in the interview that I'd like to share is that they reiterated it. We heard it from Rob Walsh last week in his speech at Podcast Movement. Troy said, oh yeah, I do this for fun. I mean, he wants to be in radio and in broadcasting in general for his profession, but he said, yeah, this podcast about TV shows, I mean, we do this for fun. This is what we like to do. So we're not expecting to make money off of it. He did say they do make a small amount of money, probably enough to cover their hosting costs or whatever, something like that, but they don't make enough to stay home and do it full time. And that's why there's been several podcast networks like TV Buzz, stuff like that were started specifically to do after TV show podcasts, talk shows, and they all have kind of collapsed because there's just no way to make money off of it. And they just run out of money at some point in time. So, okay, they go on to different things. And he was actually part of that. And he said, we just wanted to continue to do this because it's so fun. And I do it too. And Stephen, you've done it with like The Walking Dead. We have done TV related podcast shows, review shows, whatever. And it is fun. I mean, that's why we do it. It is for fun, and it is okay to podcast for fun. You don't need to make money with your podcasts.
Exactly. I really enjoy my Keeping Up with the Kardashians podcast. That's real. No, I don't do that. I do not do that.
I totally believe you do that. Just like the Gonna Gleek podcast that you do.
That one, maybe. But no, there's a lot of really, really great stuff in this episode, and I really encourage you to actually check it out and listen to it, because you really start to go through the thought process of it and really start to relate it to your potential. And I really do encourage you to check this out. It is from this week's School of Podcasting podcast, which you can find at schoolofpodcasting.com. Dave Jackson is the one that conduct this interview. And I have to say, the questions are great because I would love to see the Audacity tracks or whatever, however he edits it, because I'm going to guess a large majority of it is indeed not Dave talking, because he sets up the question and you get a whole whack story from Troy. It is amazing and really a lot of really good content in that episode.
It is. Dave, if you're listening, I know he does listen to this podcast from time to time. Dave, if you're listening, it was a great episode. Thank you very much for doing that. It's titled, It Started With a Tweet, The Amazing Troy Heinrich Story, and it is his School of Podcasting episode 524, found at schoolofpodcasting.com.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and move into what you had to say to us. Here we go. And I say us, but we all know the truth. The truth is that it's actually just directed towards SP.
Oh, no, it's never directed towards SP. They're all wanting the Stephen John Drew sort of information, and they're just sorely disappointed when they get SP. In any event, we got a comment on their YouTube page, and it was from Anthony Cumia, and he was asking us, what's the best place to find a co-host? Craigslist? Any message boards can you recommend? And he says, I have all the equipment to host a show. I just don't want to do a solo show. And that's boring for me. I feel your pain, Anthony. We didn't talk about it in the comments there, but I tried to start a podcast for a year before I got Voices of Defiance off the ground. And I had an issue getting co-hosts, because let's face it, nobody wants to podcast with SP. I have to pay money to my co-hosts.
The SP even did one where he was talking to himself with an accent. It was a horrible show, but
that one, I'd forgotten about that one. That was just in fact, both Stephen and I actually responded to this. And Stephen, what did you ask the gentleman?
Well, at first I asked what was your theme of the podcast.
Which is a big deal, because depending on your subject matter would depend on where you'd want to go to find a co-host. That was why it was important to ask that question. Once he told us that it was just a general interest topic, comedy sort of podcast, kind of like what we do a little bit on Gonna Geek, although it's a little bit more tech and science and sci-fi and comic related. It was easy for us to answer the question. So for those of you out there that are looking for a co-host, I'll tell you that you could try the podcast groups, Facebook, Reddit, Google+, but those groups aren't really set up to find other co-hosts. They're more meant as an exchange of information on how to podcast, what's going on in the podsphere, specific questions, maybe technical questions. Yeah. Like, I can't get my mixer to work. Can you help me with that? Or I would like to try this flow of my show. What do you think of my show artwork and that sort of thing? So not really meant for co-hosting. However, there are sites out there that try to link up people that want to guest on a podcast. And not that you want to start an interview show, but you could go there and you could try to basically interview somebody or ask somebody to come on board and guest host your show until you find somebody that you have great chemistry with, that has the same love of podcasting that you do, and just take them on board as you move on. I mean, we've all done it. We've all had podcasts that have changed co-hosts over the course of the years to find the perfect mix of a podcast. And in your case, Stephen, you were just what I could afford.
I was going to say, there's nothing perfect about this mix right here. So
nothing at all.
Yeah, that's a great response that you gave. The other thing that I would definitely recommend people do check out is your local podcast community. Like, let's say that you're a big fan of the Gonna Geek Network. I think that's a great example. Start checking out the shows. If they do some live shows, get in the chat rooms, interact with the community, get on Twitter, because if you just put the call out there, hey, I'm thinking about doing a show on X, anybody interested? You can get that. You don't necessarily have to do it with them, but you set it up in a way. You can say, okay, well, I really want to get the right fit, so let's do a little bit of a test. Let's do a demo sort of thing, and we'll record a bit of a trial run, and we'll see how it goes. And you can really sort of interact with the people that you are used to hearing in podcasting. So if somebody from Gonna Geek all of a sudden said to me, like if one of our listeners said, I'm looking to do a Star Wars podcast, I would absolutely try to help them see if there's some other interest. I would put it out there. Anybody interested in doing a Star Wars podcast, and maybe someone would be interested and they can connect and see whether or not they're a good fit. So really check out the community that you know.
Absolutely. And good luck to you, Anthony. And if it works out for you, please let us know how it happened.
For sure. And that's going to go ahead and wrap us up here for our feedback this week. But as a friendly reminder, if you for some reason decided to jump halfway into this podcast, well, go back and listen. But we are giving away the Audio-Technica AT2005 USB. There's no dash. This will run until the end of September 2016, and you can get in touch with us. Email contest@betterpodcasting.com. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your podcast. And we absolutely are encouraging you to give us more feedback, but just tell us about your podcast and we'll promote it on here and get you entered into that draw. It is eligible to anybody who does podcast. And if you don't podcast, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are for a podcast? Because we'll accept that as an entry too.
Yeah, we absolutely will. And come up with a working title for your podcast, because we just want to hear what your title would be.
And by the way, the Better Podcasting After Podcast, there's a trademark problem, but it's a great idea if you want to just talk about SP and I. We'll go for it. We'll go for it.
Yeah, we'll license you for a limited license for a certain amount of time, just so we can figure out if it would actually be the type of personalities that we would want in an after show. Chris Hardwick, we know that you have asked to be in our after show, and unfortunately we have to decline because I think it's sometimes, man, you're just a little bit too energetic. You need to take a nap, sir.
All right, well, there you go. That takes us to the end of episode 39 of Better Podcasting. For episode 39, I'm Stephen John Drew, encouraging you, don't obsess over your stats.
And I'm Stargate Pioneer, saying, have fun doing your hobby podcast.
Bye.
See you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at gonnageeknetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.